Welcome to the Camunda BPM online training. Today we want to have a look at task management and how you can build UIs for your processes. Basically, task management is about the user task in a BPM end process model. As soon as you have a user task, what you want to do is you want to route work to some guy in your organization. What you normally use in order to achieve that is some kind of task list, some to-do list or inbox or whatever you want to call it. This is pretty important here because the process, when it reaches a user task, what it basically does, it creates a task in the task management. And this can be accessed via the query API, in our case, via the Java REST API. Then you can query all the tasks for a group or for a user, show that as some kind of list, and then the people can select which task they are working on. Therefore, they normally have some kind of task form because you want to show some data from the process or what happened in the past or these kind of things. Maybe enter some data and then submit that form, which normally means that the user completes the task, which basically boils down or in the background is handed over to the process engine, which advances in the process flow. This is the basic idea about user task. I think that's pretty straightforward. The important thing here is that you basically can query all the tasks via API. We have a so-called form key. We will see that in more detail later, where you can basically configure which form should be used for a task, and then you can complete the task. And there is a so-called Camunda task list component within the Camunda BPM stack. This is something you can leverage if you want. To be honest, most of our customers build their own task list. So it's pretty much okay if you build your own task list, if you want to have it your own technology, integrated in your portal, or maybe styled in the way you want to. So there are a couple of good reasons to write your own task list. And since it's really straightforward, you can build your own task list in like 10 minutes, the first easy one. It makes sense in a lot of the cases. So the task list we deliver is mostly used for rapid prototyping or easy applications. We're currently improving the task list, so expect some more features in the next versions of Camunda BPM. So we're going steadily to a phase where it should be really usable out of the box for some use cases. But it can access the whole task management via API as well, so you're not forced to use our task list. What I said with the form key is basically the same. You can use the form key. It's a string for us. You can use it for whatever you want. So it might reference a form, but it might also configure some JSON configuring UI or whatever. We'll see that in more depth later on. Okay, that's basically about task management. When you completed that task, basically the workflow engine, the process engine decides how to move on. And if it reaches another user task, that task is put on the task list again. Okay, so this is the concept of task lists. If you look at the engine, what we really separate is the notion of the task. So we have an own task management, we have an own task entity. This results in an own task table in the database. And we have the process flow, the process instance, and these kind of things. When you enter a user task, what happens in the background is that we create a task in the internal task management. When this task is completed, basically it notifies the waiting process instance, and that means the process instance moves on in the flow. Okay. But this is separated. So what you could do with the API, you could create your own tasks. Okay, they don't have to be created by a process instance. You can create own tasks, or you can create subtasks and these kind of things. We don't look into much details of that here in that module, but explore the API, play around with it. It's quite easy to create tasks. When you create a task, and what you basically do is you do some kind of assignment. And there are two things you can set. You can set candidates. In the BPMN 2.0 standard, it's named potential owners. So they might do the task. That basically is some kind of group task list, or imagine it's some kind of team inbox. Okay, so everybody in management or everybody in sales see the task, but only one of them is doing it. And this is a contrast to the what we call SNE and the BPMN calls the human performer. That's one guy who really does that task. So the basic or typical flow is that you assign it to a group, and then when the user basically watches the group task list, it takes out the task and claims it. We call it claim, to have it on his personal task list. This is basically something where I say, I want to do that, and then I'm set as an SNE. And then it vanishes from the group task list. So nobody else will see it and nobody else will be able to claim it. If two guys at the same time click a claim button, one of them wins, the other one gets an error that the task is already claimed. Okay, so you can claim that one in order to do it. You can unclaim it as well, so you can put it back on the list if you're not doing it. You might assign it to an SNE directly if you want to push work to a specific person. Sometimes that's the case because it's a special employee who wants to go on vacation, or it's a special clerk for this customer, or the account manager, or whatever. Then it makes sense to push it on the personal task list. But the more common use case is to use groups. You can push it to candidate users. So this is a comma separate list of users who might do that. But there are not many use cases where you really want to use that. So the typical thing is candidate groups or maybe SNE. Okay, this we can see in the task list as well. So I want to show you that live actually to make a quick demo. So you remember our tweet process, our Twitter process. I have the review tweet task. Until now, we assigned that always to the demo user. So that basically means that I push it to the demo user directly. So I want to exchange that by assigning it to a group, which is the management group. One important thing here is that for us, these informations here are pure strings. So I could enter some group which does not exist within the process engine, what we call the identity module, where we create the groups and the users. So this doesn't have to exist. So this is my own group, and I could make something like la 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 as well. So that's not a big deal. I can add whatever I want to add here. The important thing, I deploy that in the background. The important thing here is that when I query the task list, what I use in the background is the query API. So I basically say task service, create task query, and then I make a condition on the candidate groups, for example. So I say, give me all the tasks for the candidate groups, management, accounting, sales, and whatever. And this resolving in which groups I am as a current user is done by this web application. So if you have your own task list developed, then this is up to you to do the resolving. So if you whatever log in with your own identity component or LDAP or whatever you want to use, then you can query the groups the current user is in yourself, and then you access our query with that string. So there's no need to sync any users or groups to the Camunda process engine. Okay, and this makes it pretty flexible actually. So that's really a good idea normally to use. But let's get started with the demo. I start a new Twitter demo process. So enter some data. Okay, this is my form. I entered the data. I don't get any task in my personal task list, but I have a joint inbox where I see basically all the tasks from my group. And I can check the management group if I want to directly. But this one is maybe nicer because I don't have to go over all the groups I'm in. And now what you can do is you can claim the task. Okay, and basically that means maybe we can, oh no, we can leave that. If I claim the task, it basically is removed from the group task list, so it's not visible in the group task list anymore. Nobody else can claim it, but it's in my personal task list. Okay, I can still unclaim it, so I basically put it back on the list if I'm deciding not to do it. But I can claim it in order to do it, and then I can work on it. Okay, so this is the claim and the unclaim. I could even delegate it now to various people. We will see that later on as well. Okay, so that's basically the claim and unclaim method. Okay, so what we use is the candidate group and the SNE. This is that. If we look at the life cycle, so our task created in the task management has a life cycle as well, an own life cycle. So within the user task, you basically have that life cycle. So when you create a new task, it's new, that makes sense. Normally, it's either at least set some candidate, so it's unassigned, or you assign it directly, you push it to a personal task list, then it's an assign. In the assigned state, then you have the claim and the unclaim. Okay. You can reassign, so that basically means I just change the SNE. And there is what I said earlier, there is a delegation, so I can delegate the task. That basically means the difference between reassign and delegate is that with reassign, I change the SNE. With delegate, I remember who was the original SNE. And when I resolve that task later, it's basically put back on the task list of the original SNE. So that means, okay, please do it. And when you've done, tell me. And then I will maybe review it and I will complete it. Okay, that's the difference between delegate and reassign. When it's completed, it normally gets deleted. So it's not visible in the runtime anymore. Okay, that's it. That's the life cycle. There are a couple of attributes on a task which might be interesting as well, because you can have a look at that. So if you look at the task of Camunda, what we have is we have the ID, the name. That's interesting. The ID is the primary key in the database of that task. The name is basically the name from the BPMN process model, but if you use expression language here, like we saw in other modules already, if you use that, it's resolved before the name is set on that task. So this one is already the correct resolved name. There's a description. This, by the way, is copied from the BPMN2 as well. So there's a documentation. So this is handed over in the description. There is a priority. Internally, we don't use it, and we don't set anything special here. You can set a default from the process model again. So there's a priority, so you can use that. You could use expression language here if you want to. So that's a priority. You can use it in your own task list to make a special color or an exclamation mark or ordering or these kind of things. The owner is the one who was the original SNE when you delegate. Okay. Yeah, we have the SNE, delegation, the process information, the time the task was created. The task definition key, that's important as well. The task definition key is the ID of the element in BPMN. Oh, sorry, my fault. Okay, that's the task definition date. We have a due date. The due date can be set by the BPMN as well. So we can maybe calculate the due date. Okay, it might be expression language, or it might be an ISO date, so I can set a date. That's a due date. We don't use the due date internally, but you can use it for sorting your task list, or you might want to have some mechanism to query overdue tasks and sending emails or escalations or these kind of things. That's something normally you build externally and use the query API. You can set a follow-up date, which basically means I don't want to work on this date before, on this task before that date. So that means basically normally it's hidden from the task list until the date is due. So it's basically, yeah, hiding some tasks until some date. Pretty nice. Yeah, and basically that are the important things. So this is something you can do on the task. Okay, let's quickly maybe have a look at the API. We do that in the test case. You already saw a bit in the first overview about this. So I start a Twitter demo process here. And now I use the Java API, and this is what I want to leverage now to do a task query for all tasks for demo. In this case, this should fail now, right? Because we assigned it to management now. Yes. So let's quickly verify that. Okay, we have a different problem here. I refresh my Eclipse. I think it didn't build it. Test case. And typical Eclipse problems. This is what I normally do then. I clean the project. And then it should work, yeah. Okay, so we started it. Expecting task to be assigned to user demo, but it's not. This is actually already this one. Okay, so we comment that. But we should see it here, but here we don't see it that nice actually, because the single result method should return a null object, and then we get a null pointer here. So this is actually not a nice test case. Ser not null task. Task count. So let's check that. Yes. So we don't get a task. So we don't want to make a restriction on the task SME, but we say task candidate group. And now this is interesting as well. Now you could use a task candidate group in. So I can hand in a list of groups I'm currently in. Okay, so this is normally it's a two-step approach. The first thing is you query all the groups for the current user, and the next thing is you query the group task list for all his groups. Okay, in my case, I make it easier. I want to have everything for management. So that should work again. Right. Nice. Okay. So this is how you can query, okay, the candidate group and the task. There is no way to do a single query for the personal task list and the group task list. There's always two steps. Okay. So I get the task. Before we complete it, we want to now use the task service to claim it. Okay, so we get that one, and I claim it for me. What I said earlier, there's no user burned currently configured in my engine, but it will work. It's a string. The engine actually don't care. Okay. So, and then what we do, we check two things. When I assigned it, I expect that the query for management, I do a count this time. Don't want too much. Should not find it anymore because it's now claimed. Okay, but it should be found for the task SNE. Right. Let's check that. Works. Okay. This is how it works. As soon as you claim, it's removed from that one and set to my personal task list. I could unclaim it. You might wonder, is there an unclaim method? Unfortunately not. There's an issue for that. What you can do is you can claim the task for user now, and then it's changed. Okay, so this is the unclaim. It was put back to the management group in this case. Right. And the complete. Yeah, what we can maybe check, that's interesting as well. When I claimed it for burned, and now second guy wants to claim it as well, maybe my colleague. Then this should give an exception. I make it easy for the moment, and I just print it on the stack trace, but I don't want to fail the test case because that's fine. That's as expected. So let's see. Yeah, we got a stack trace here. So it says task 107 is already claimed by somebody else. Yeah, that makes sense, right? By the way, it was intentional that the name of the one who claimed it is not mentioned in the exception, because you might not want to give that information to the user. Okay. Fails as expected. So this is basically about the query API. We might move on with a quick addition. We are currently in Java. A pretty common use case is actually that if you create a user task, you want to send an email, a push notification to somebody where you say, okay, hey, here's the task for you to do. Makes sense, right? How you can easily achieve that, because it's no built-in functionality, but it's really easy to do. As you can write a listener, there are so-called task listeners. Okay, that's an own API from us, like execution listeners, but task listeners, where I get notified if I get a new task, or if it was assigned, or if it was ended. And then I can have some Java, and there's an example actually online. So that's a good moment to check the examples. So if you go to our Camunda GitHub repository, you find the Camunda BPM examples. And there you find a lot of examples how to do various things. And if you go to user task assignment email, you will find exactly the code I used here. Okay, so I basically just copied it. And what it basically does, it gets the task. It queries our identity service for the user object and gets the email from it. This is something now that's a bit tied to our identity component used here. So if I have the demo user, for example, I have an email configured for it. And this is used here. And then I send an email via, in this case, Apache common simple mail. Pretty easy stuff. And I send over a link. Okay. This is attached to the review tweet user task with not an execution listener, but a task listener. And I use it for the event assignment. So then it's sent it. So let's quickly check that. So we basically use the demo application. Nope, wrong. We create a new Twitter demo process. Okay. So it got submitted to the management group. The interesting thing is now I don't get any email because the management group was assigned. Okay, so In this case, I would have to write some code which basically queries all the user from the management group and send them an email if I want to do that. But we haven't did that here. But as soon as I am assigned, okay, because it might be pushed to my task list or somebody delegated it to me. Okay, I got an email for the review tweet task, and I get the link, which is basically the same as the display button, so we can jump in the form directly and approve it or not. Okay, so that's already pretty good what we have. So we saw the whole life cycle, you saw the API, we saw the task listener. The next thing we want to talk about is the task forms. For the task forms, till now we always use JSF. And what you basically do here, for us, that's an external task form. And because the JSF is external to the task list, so it could be whatever you like. It could be Vaadin or GWT or PHP or whatever you like, actually. And what you can do is for every start event or for user task, you can configure a so-called form key. This is, first of all, it's a string. You can write in whatever you want. But our task list interprets that in a way that we have a special format you have to follow here. In the case of the external task forms, what I basically do is I tell the task list that this is provided by the application. This is used in order to build the right URL for the form. And I tell it part of the URL which I want to use for that form. So in the case of the review tweet form, this works like this. I create a new one. Okay. Now, if I use the play button, what happens is that it builds a URL for this process application, that the web context path of the process application, and the form key I told it, I configure, and I get some parameters, for example, the task ID that I can use in order to query variables or data or even the task name and these kind of things. And I handed a callback URL, which is basically used after the submit to go to this URL. So in this case, I'm going back to my task list. But I could do whatever I like, actually. So that would work as well. So I review it, I submit, and now I'm forwarded to the Camunda org page. Okay, that's pretty straightforward here. How does that work actually with the JSF form now? Can I have a look at that? In the background, what I have the review tweet.jsf, which is a normal JSF page. And this JSF page basically gets the parameters, the task ID and the callback. What it does, it starts that task. That basically calls the context in the background. There's some CDI magic involved. We'll see that in a minute. Context in the background. I'm now working on this task. So after I did that, I can just say task. So the process engine knows which task is mentioned here. And I can use some special stuff here for the process variable in order to access them. So this is magic in the background. You don't have to care about that. We will do that for you. And that's pretty cool, actually, with CDI. So I have the process variables here. I have the task. And I have a button where I tell the task form to complete. That basically in the background, that calls our task service with the complete task method. And that's it. Pretty easy form here, I hope. Okay, this is how we used JSF. You can use whatever you like here. So you're not tied to JSF. You can write your own Vaadin task list or maybe only your own Vaadin forms. Then you have to hand over the task ID and these kind of things. You can use HTML5, PHP, or whatever you like. We have, this is an example from a customer using Swing. No problem. You can use that. You might even want to use third-party software for task management. We have customers using Siebel or SAP task management. So what we do there when we create the task, With the listener, we call a web service to create the task in the third-party application, and then we get the event back when the task is completed, so we can call our task service complete method and move on in the process. Pretty straightforward to integrate as well. For the JSF support, we saw that already live. How it works is actually leverages CDI, contextual dependency injection. It's part of the Java EE standard. And that's actually pretty cool. We provide a CDI integration. That's the so-called business process. And this one is after you call that start task method or some other methods to basically combine it with the right scope. After you did that, what you can do is you can query for variables. Now it knows which task or process instance I'm talking about, so I can always query for variables. This can be used, in this case, the example that's pretty common, we have an order managed by JPA, the entity manager, and I just stored the order ID in my process as a process variable. And I can now find that by querying the process variable, finding the order by primary key, and then produce it as an own bean, a CDI bean with the name order. And when I do that, I can, in my JSF form, I can just write order. Okay, because I started the task, so it's clear which process I'm talking about. I'm getting the order ID variable, finding the right order for it, and then I can display it. You could even update it with the right form. And this works with the entity manager. You have second level cache and these kind of things. So that works pretty good actually out of the box. You might want to use the order in the expression language of process definitions as well. Okay, it's powerful, but it's not part of this module. So we leave the CDI and JSF integration for now. If you're interested, have a look at the Java EE process application tutorial. So there's a get started tutorial where you can do that step by step. If you're interested in Java EE and CDI, that's your homework to do. And as a second exercise, you can write maybe your own task list using JSF. That's really easy. It takes like 15 minutes. So what you can do, you can write a task list controller. Okay, pretty easy JSF bean. Inject somehow the current user and get his groups, and you inject the task service from us. Then you can do the task query. Maybe tied to one process, maybe it's global task list, so we will skip that. And then you can use the result in a very easy table from JSF. Okay, should not take longer actually than 50 minutes if you're good in JSF. Maybe an hour if you have to set up all the JSF parts. If you have questions for that, we can answer them in the live meeting as well. I'm happy to do that. Okay, but there are other forms of task forms as well. So we provide not only the external task forms using your own technology, but you can do something integrated in our task list. And there are basically three ways to do that. The first are embedded task forms. There you provide an HTML snippet, a small HTML file, which is then rendered within the task list as a form. But you have full control of the layout and the elements and all these things. That's the embedded task forms. The generated task forms, there you provide basically a list of variables which should be rendered here, but you don't influence the layout. That's basically a generated form, but you influence which variables are shown here. I show you that in a minute. And we have the generic task form. The generic task form is a generic one. It's always rendered if we don't have any other task form configured, and it basically shows all variables, and you can do anything there. It's not really usable for real life, but it's pretty handy for prototyping. Okay, so let's see how that looks in real life using our Twitter example. So the first thing is I remove the create tweet form key from the start event. If I do that, I don't have any form configured. So this leads to the generic form to be used. So no form has been defined, so I can use the generic form, and that basically means I can create my process variables myself. Okay, let's do that. And some content. Hello. Okay, and then I started. Now we can check if that worked. So I got my stuff here. So that worked pretty well, actually. Yeah, as you could see, it's a generic one. So it's really handy to get started quickly. But it's you have to know how the variables are named. You have to know the type and these kind of things. So it's maybe not that not really usable for a real life application where you have a lot of clerks working with it. Okay, these are the generic task forms. Now let's use an embedded task form for the process. I actually prepared something. So I have a small HTML page. So it's HTML, create tweet. There's a form. This is basically using Twitter Bootstrap. We're using Twitter Bootstrap internally. I think it's no longer called Twitter Bootstrap, actually. Bootstrap, so go for Bootstrap, right? And there you can find all the information, how that works. That's really powerful to do a good layout in HTML. And then I have my email. I have an input field. That's a markup from us. It's a form field. And this name is used for the process variable. And then I can do some additional stuff like this one is required. I add a pattern, regex. This case, this is a regex that this is really an email address. And I enter the content. Pretty straightforward. What I do in order to get that running, I use the form key again. In this case, I say embedded, because it should be embedded task form, but it's content of the process application, and you find it in forms, create tweet HTML. Deploy that. Okay, should be done. Yeah, and now I get this task form here with the email and the content. Okay, so we can check that. How should be sufficient. Works, and again, the process variables are written correctly. Okay, these are the embedded task form. Actually, that's quite powerful. If you look at the documentation, there you find information about the task forms here, and there's some more information down there. Wait a second. Creating embedded task form, so you have information of the field types, what you can do there, and there's even some possibility to add some validation or to add AngularJS and JavaScript code. So what you even could do here, you could fill like a drop-down box with the don't know, customers loaded from the server. Technically, that's possible. So it's already pretty powerful to have these task forms, the embedded ones. The last thing we want to have a look at are the generated task forms. The generated task forms are a bit different. So what I do here, I remove the form key, and now I go to the so-called form fields. So I can add fields for my form. So I want to say this is my email. Okay, it's email. The default value, I want to have this as a string. I could add some validation or some additional properties which might be used to display it. I don't to use anything here for the moment, and I have the content. No default value, but it's a string. I set this, and I deploy the process. And this now means that Maybe it was too quick. Didn't deploy it. Oh no, it's already the right thing. It basically looks the same because I added the same stuff here. Okay, so that's the form I have here, and this is pretty handy actually for prototyping because you can easily create forms without writing HTML or stuff like that. You don't influence or cannot control the layout. That's the downside of it, but that's for prototyping, it doesn't matter. For some easy applications, it doesn't matter as well. So we have customers using that in production actually. So that's the last possibility you have here. So these are the 4 things you can do. It depends on what you want to do with it, what's good for you. Normally, you start with the generic task forms, maybe in the first step, and then you might either use embedded task forms if you want to control what you're doing there, or generated task forms if you don't mind. And if you get more powerful stuff, or if you want to really have a rich UI with a lot of features, then you might want to use the external task forms. But it's basically up to you. These are the possibilities. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Homework, as always, play around with it. Build your own task list with JSF if you're interested in that. Build your own task forms for the Twitter process. And if you have any questions, ask them in the live meeting. See you next time. Thank you.